SlaughterHouse Five. Chapter 1. God love it, in 1967. It looked a lot like Dayton, Ohio, more open spaces than Dayton has. There must be tons of human bone meal in the ground. I went back there with an old war buddy, Bernard B. O'Hare, and we made friends with a cab driver who took us to the slaughterhouse where we had been locked up at night as prisoners of war. His name was Gerhard Mueller. He told us that he was a prisoner of the Americans for a while. We asked him how it was to live under communism, and he said that it was terrible at first because everybody had to work so hard and because there wasn't much shelter or food or clothing. But things were much better now. He had a pleasant little apartment and his daughter was getting an excellent education. His mother was incinerated in the Dresden firestorm, so it goes. He sent O'Hare a postcard at Christmas time, and here it is. What it said: I wish you and your family, also as to your friend, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I hope that we'll meet again in a world of peace and freedom in the taxi cab if the accident will. I like that very much, if the accident will. I would hate to tell you what this lousy little book cost me in money and anxiety and time. When I got home from the Second World War 23 years ago, I thought it would be easy for me to write about the destruction of Dresden, since all I would have to do would be to report what I had seen. And I thought, too, that would be a masterpiece, or at least make me a lot of money, since the subject was so big. But not many words about Dresden came from my mind then. Not enough of them to make a book anyways, and not many words came now either, when I have become an old fart with his memories and his Pall Malls with his sons full grown. I think of how useless the Dresden part of my memory has been, and yet how tempting Dresden has been to write about, and I'm reminded of the famous limerick. There was a young man from Stanbowel who soliloquized thus to his tool: You took all my wealth, and you ruined my health, and now you won't pee, you old fool. And I'm reminded, too, of the song that goes, My name is Jan Janssen, I work in Wisconsin, I work in a lumber mill there. The people I meet where I walk down the street, they say, What's your name? And I say, My name is Jan Janssen, I work in Wisconsin. And so on to infinity. Over the years, people I've met have often asked me what I'm working on, and I've usually replied that the main thing was a book about Dresden. I said that to Harrison Starr and the movie maker one time, and he raised his eyebrows and inquired, Is it an anti-war book? Yes, I said, I guess. You know what I say to people when I hear they're writing anti-war books. No, what do you say, Harrison Starr? I say, why don't you write an anti-glacier book instead? What he meant, of course, was that there would always be wars, that there were always easy to stop as glaciers. I believe that too. And even if wars didn't keep coming, the glaciers there would still be plain old death. When I was somewhat younger, working on my famous Dresden book, I asked an old war buddy named Bernard B. O'Hare if I could come to see him. He was a district attorney in Pennsylvania. I was a writer on Cape Cod. We had been privates in the war, infantry scouts. We had never expected to make any money after the war, but we were doing quite well. I had the Bell Telephone Company find him for me. They are wonderful that way. I have this disease late at night, sometimes involving alcohol and the telephone. I get drunk, and I drive my wife away with the breath like mustard gas and roses, and then speaking gravely and eloquently into the telephone, I ask the telephone operators to connect me with this friend or that one from whom I have not heard of in years. I got O'Hare on the line in this way. He is short and I am tall. We were Mutt and Jeff in the war. We were captured together in the war. I told him who I was on the telephone. He had no trouble believing it. He was up. He was reading. Everybody else in his house was asleep. Listen, I said, I'm writing this book about Dresden. I like some help remembering stuff. I wonder if I could come down and see you, and we could drink and talk and remember. He was unenthusiastic. He said he could remember much. He told me, though, to come ahead. I think the climax of the books will be the execution of the poor old Edgar Derby. I said, the irony is so great, a whole city gets burned down and thousands of people killed, and then it's one of American foot soldiers arrested in the ruins for taking a teapot, and he's given a regular trial, and then he's shot by a firing squad, said O'Hare. Don't you think that's really where the climax should come? I don't know anything about it, he said. That's your trade, not mine. As a trafficker in climaxes and thrills and characterizations and wonderful dialogue and suspense and confrontations, I had outlined the Dresden story many times. The best outline I ever made, or anyways, the prettiest one, was the back of a roll of wallpaper. I used my daughter's crayons, a different color for each main character. One end of the wallpaper was the beginning of the story and the other was the end. And then there was all that middle part, which was the middle, and the blue line met the red line, and where the yellow line and the yellow line stopped because the character represented by the yellow line was dead. And so on, the destruction of Dresden was represented by a vertical band of orange cross-hatching, and all the lines that were still alive passed through it, came out the other side. The end, where all the lines stopped, was a beet field on the Elbe outside of Halle, and the rain was coming down, and the war in Europe had been over for a couple of weeks. We were formed in ranks with Russian soldiers guarding us, Englishmen, Americans, Dutchmen, Belgians, Frenchmen, Canadians, South Africans, New Zealanders, Australians, thousands of us about to stop being prisoners of war, and on the other side of the field were thousands of Russians and Poles and Yugoslavians, and so on, guarded by American soldiers. An exchange was made there in the rain, one for one. O'Hare and I climbed into the back of an American truck with a lot of others. O'Hare didn't have any souvenirs, almost everybody else did. I had a ceremonial Luftwaffe saber, still do. The rabid little American I call Paul Lazaro in this book had about a quart of diamonds and emeralds and rubies and so on. He had taken these from dead people in the cellars of Dresden, so it goes. An idiotic Englishman who had lost all his teeth somewhere had his souvenir in a canvas bag. The bag was resisting on my insteps. He would peek into the bag every now and then, and he would roll his eyes and swivel his scrawny neck trying to catch people looking covetously at his bag, and he would bounce the bag on his insteps. I think this bouncing was accidental, but I was mistaken.